when I was a little kid, I moved up here, 57, 58, 57, 58. Everything was one lane here. All these roads were real narrow. The road by Mohawk was narrow. The road to Johnsville, and a lot of turnouts going into London. Then it was Lundy's, now it's Plymouth Pines. We lived in Clio upriver, about a mile upriver, where Willow Creek comes into the Feather River. And that was all dirt from Clio to our house and beyond. And that was all, that's Clio 40A, I think. It comes out in Maybe. And that was supposed to be a development, never happened. A lot of things never happened. But when I was a little kid, I went to boys camp in Mohawk Boys Camp, which was near Mohawk. And my parents built a cabin on the property. 4 acres cost $16,000 back then. And we bought it from Old Man Wynn, who owned all the way from Willow Creek up past the trestle, the existing trestle now. But when I was a little kid, we would come over to McClare's, it's called then. Pat and Mike Flynn and I, we would raft across the Feather River or walk across it when it was really low. There was a trestle there, probably this vintage, 1864 or something like that. And the railroad grade it was narrow gauge, it ran all the way over to here, so we would walk the grade, go across, go by the trestle. It was half a trestle and got blown out by a big flood at some point. But you could walk over here, and that was all Frank Carmichael's land, coming over to just about where you turn up A15 and go up to Portola. Frank owned a huge chunk of this valley. I'm not sure whether he owned this pasture, but he owned everything from A15 over to Gray Eagle back then. Big cattle rancher, him and his brother Roy. And when we would walk over here, bathing suit, towel, $1. And you could 50 cents all day here, especially if you're under 12, and swim in the pool, white sulfur heated pool. And it was had a diving board and a high dive. And I remember the guys, Portola High School guys, would grab the tree limb that there was a 3-meter jump. It was just a box jump, and right near the edge of the pool too. But they would grab the limb and do a flip until somebody broke the limb off of one of the cottonwoods and grew right along the edge of the pool there. But it was quite a place, and you could Mackenzie, Harry and Leah had it back then and ran it, and there's more than one Mackenzie around here too, because they had a. Roger, you went to a camp over here.
Mackenzie Guest Ranch, yeah.
Yeah, it was just like around the corner there. It was part of what, I don't know, one of the estates now. Is it Mohawk Meadows Estates or what is it?
It was in Whitehawk.
It's
Part of
partially
Whitehawk.
in Mohawk Meadows.
And that was they I remember talking to him, and he would, in the summertime, they would bring the horses up here. It was a dude ranch. Everybody rode horses and rode around here. And then he would take them down to Arizona in the wintertime. And that happened for years and years and years and years. But walking over here, it was an incredible place. And they had other cabins. They had cabins here that you could stay if you worked in the area. I mean, didn't cost very much to live here then. But I remember driving. We bought the property in Clio from a guy named Wynn. I'm not sure his first name was Ed Wynn, but he would. His son was vice president of Penny's back then, and he didn't like it. He didn't like his son coming around. He didn't like a lot of people. He liked my dad for some reason. That's why he sold us the property on the river. But he would sit up in his house. This is where Willow Creek runs into the Feather River. He would sit up in his house, and he had a vegetable garden, and he had a berry patch, and then our house was down across the road there. And every once in a while, you would hear him, he would shoot magpies off his berry patch. aimed towards our house. And yeah, I can remember, every once in a while you'd see something would scuff up on the road or like that. But he would take the birds that he was a good shot, take the birds, and he would tack them along his trellis of the berry things to show that, don't land here.
How ugly is that?
He was an old dude. He was, he'd been around a long time. But he decided to clear some property off the side of Willow Creek. And there was a big rock there where all the fish seemed to stay. We could fish that. But he cleared his property off, and there was a lot of cedar on the property then. So he took his tractor and made a big hole and put all the cedar logs into it and lit it on fire. Cedar burns great as long as it gets enough air. Well, he didn't let it burn all the way down. He just covered it over with dirt. And I remember sitting at my dad's, we had hammocks out in front of the cabin. We were sitting there, it's August, it's like 110 out, I don't know, it was really hot. And I look over, and it looked like hell breaking loose. It had gasified, I guess, enough of the cedar underneath the ground where these jets of flame would come out of the ground, like 5, 10, 15 feet high. And I ran in and told my dad, and my dad comes outside, and just as then, the wind was blowing towards Portola, thank God. It just, the whole pile went up at once and went into the trees. And he said, get in the car. And I go, why? And he says, we're leaving. And I said, my brother, my mother, we got out of Clio. It burnt from there. That's why there's nothing in Tunnel 36 or Gold Mountain or all that way. It burned almost all the way to Portola, and it stopped at the falls, basically. I guess they got it in control, but it cooked everything. And I don't know that they ever blamed him for that, but it changed the whole aspect of where Maybe is and Tunnel 36, which is that canyon between there and Gold Mountain. And yeah, it cleaned everything down. And then years later, some of the vegetation came back, but it was never really the same because it's all volcanic in there. And it takes a long, long time for stuff to grow back.
So is that why they have juniper trees in that area instead of pines?
On the going up A15?
Yeah.
That's juniper only grows in really nasty, horrible, rocky soil.
Right.
And that's a big volcanic shift right there. In fact, most of Gold Mountain is part of Beckworth Peak, the volcanism that's happened around here. This is the east-west, my daughter's a geologist, this is what it is. East-west strike-slip zone. The Sierra Nevadas run north and south. This is the only part that runs all the way over to Lassen that is east-west, and it's also why the gold mining here was so good, because all the minerals were up near the surface comparatively, as opposed to like Sutter's Fort or some of the big mines in Nevada and stuff like that. There's still mining, there still could be mining here. The only reason they're not mining Eureka Peak now is it filled up, they hit an underground river and it filled the entire base of the mountain up with water. They couldn't pump it out fast enough. And that was an interesting fact back in the day. I guess they even found diamonds up there at one point. And somebody says Kimberly Clark came in and bought the rights and just shut the whole thing down. Because they were the big South African diamond mining people back in the day. And we slowly transitioned from Clio over to Mohawk. We bought the Mohawk Resort back in like 1960 and sort of refurbished it and got a lot of cabins from the California Fruit Exchange box factory. That's what Grayville was before it became the resort town it is now. And so we dragged, I don't know, 15 or 20 cabins over to Mohawk and then added on rooms on it because they're just single room, kitchen, bathroom, bed. That was it. That was what most of those guys had. They were, factory kind of places. And the big transitions when Gray Eagle came in and turned it into a, what would you say, development, I guess, yeah. You could only they only sold 40 lots a year for years and years and years, till they got out to Fraser Creek, I guess it is. That comes out of Gull Lake. And then they had sold enough property, and they tried to have other properties or subdivisions, but land and the county did not mix. There's no perk, no soil that would you could put a leach field in. So some of that changed the aspect there. I remember they paved our road out to our house in Clio. That was a big thing. And then they paved up to the railroad tracks, and we had bought 4.5 acres right across the face of the railroad tracks, and a little ravine to the side. If you go up from here out of Clio up to the railroad tracks, it's paved and then stops, and then C Road starts from there on. But we bought that property because 1961 there was a project called the Ridgefield Project, and it was the California Rice Growers Association, this is what I remember anyway, had part of the water rights to the Feather River, this Middle Fork and maybe more down towards Oroville. But they had a project, and they were going to build a dam at the end of this valley, where you drive out of here past Danny West property now. That was Frank's property back in the day. But you can see there's a natural rise to the land, and you go up a little bit, around a couple turns, and then you're on the level with the Gull Lake Highway and Gray Eagle. Well, if you look across when you're driving there, you can see there's a rise of about, 50 or 60 feet. They were going to put a 100-foot dam all the way across there and across the Feather River. We would have been 100 feet underwater here.
Oh my gosh.
Instead of Lake Davis and Frenchman Lake and all that kind of stuff. It would have been a big change here. And what stopped it was too close to the railroad tracks in the Western Pacific Railroad. It was bringing it up that high. Tracks are right there, 100 feet of water. They were afraid it would undermine the tracks, at least at that point, from the trestle to where it would go into Gray Eagle. And so the federal government stopped it. And they built more down the canyon, more dams down the canyon, and Almanor and Butt Lake and what's the other one I'm thinking of? Bucks Lake. Bucks Lake has they all generate power, and they flow down the canyon and ends up at Lake Oroville, I guess. What else going on there? We used to ride a lot of horses around here. It was White Sulphur Springs was pretty big. It was big for weddings back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. A lot of my friends got married here because in the afternoon when the wind blows, it's almost like Hawaii here. You get the view, it's warm, and the pool, and this whole venue here was incredible, and it has changed over the years. But they had a changing room just for the wedding guests, and it was probably 75 feet that way. All that's gone now. But I'm not sure when they changed. When that guy that bought this place, I don't know who he was.
2017, the pool stayed
Yeah.
till 2017, and it was built in 1920.
Yeah.
And the old building that people changed in was falling down, so the
Oh, I bet.
volunteers tore
Took
it
it
down and built a new one.
Oh,
It's very nice.
cool.
Yeah.
They had, trying to think who else. What else we had happen here? Oh, Harry Mackenzie was a crop duster before he became involved here, or probably generations involved here. And he met with a guy who lived in Clio, had the Dove or La Paloma down in Quincy. It was a Mexican food restaurant. And he'd been a Navy jet pilot, and Harry'd been a crop duster. They probably had 40, 50,000 hours of flying time together. Anyway, this guy owned the La Paloma bought what they called a long pusher. And Harry had what do you call it? It was a powered hang glider. Ultralight. And he would, he had a taste for flying, and he would take off here and fly around. I remember he tried to, one afternoon, he stayed out too long, and it relies on heat coming off the valley for the lift. And his sun's going down, and he's up there too high, so he comes down, it was quite a feat to get over the power lines over there, and under the power lines here, and land, and turn, and land. And he almost made it, but there was an old white fence out there by the pool, and he clipped it. And I remember it went over, and they didn't have the chest straps back there, they just had a belt. And he tore his spleen, and tough guy, he unhooks himself, gets Leah to drive him to the hospital. He recovers, so he hooks up with this guy from the La Paloma, I can't remember his name. Big man, he'd been a Navy jet pilot. They put together what they called the long pusher, and it was a world-renowned kit plane, and they'd flown it around the world, and it had a lot of good things about it. And so they two-seater, put it together, and I think they took off probably out of Beckworth and flew into this valley in the spring earlier than it is now. And you don't fly in this valley when there's snow on the hills. What happens is you get the thermal push from Sacramento and that valley over the top of the Sierras, and then it drops 30, 40, 50 degrees as it catches all the snow on the road. And they tried to fly out of here, and they made it around once, and then they tried to fly over Haskell Peak, which is right over there. Haskell Peak's 1,000 feet. It doesn't look like it, but it's 1,000 feet higher than Mills Peak. They didn't make it. They got up so high, and they ran out of air. They ran out of lift, I guess. And they didn't make it. They clipped off a bunch of trees, and that was the end of Harry and the guy that had the La Paloma. And that was tragedy. That was a big tragedy. They made some changes here, and then Leah got too old to function here and run this place. I remember cleaning the windows here with some friends. This glass is old, really, really old. And you can't conventionally, you have your cleaner and your razor blades and that kind of stuff. You can't do that to these windows. They're all full of bubbles because it's all flat blown glass here. This is new. But the old glass, I remember especially upstairs, oh God. You were terrified if you touch it too hard, it just, the whole frame would move. And that didn't work out very well. And then the inheritors, the Millers, there's a brother and a sister that inherited this place, and they were going to make it into a bed and breakfast. Because my wife and I stayed here one night after they got it fixed up. There's 4 bedrooms upstairs.
5.
I don't remember 4. I don't remember much then, but we had a really great time here. It was pretty functional. They had a great breakfast and that kind of stuff, but they didn't want to live here. The new inheritors, and I think one lived in Chico and one lived maybe in Sacramento or that kind of stuff. But they didn't want to give up their lives to invest in this place, and that's when things change. And I can't remember the guy who bought this place. Lullo?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he wanted to make it. He wanted to have a big mansion here, and this didn't fit his style. So I guess he let it go. They tore the deck off here once, and it was people got really depressed about that.
And all the outbuildings back
Yeah,
there.
that all.
There were 2 left.
Yeah, they,
I think he tore those down.
we had a caretaker here for a little while. That, 'cause I remember he hired me to come over and mow the lawn here, which was, God, it was forever here.
Will you still do that?
Yeah.
Maybe, I have a lot of mowers I can dedicate to this place.
Your old mower is still here.
Yeah,
Well, that's
it's all
right.
down.
When you gave the shell,
The
you
green
gave
one?
it to me.
I got a couple
$2,000
of those.
later.
You gotta have some lift on these mowers, you can't, you know, the gophers here are pretty nasty. But, yeah, and I remember, this didn't happen too long ago, I watched the lightning hit that hit.
Oh, yeah.
That was too, I mean, I thought this place was going up.
We all did.
It was-
It looked like it, yeah.
They had a fire truck, or the Forest Service and also the fire department had trucks parked right here.
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It burned, what, 3,000 acres up there on the ridge?
Yeah. Luckily, the wind was going like it always does, going up 8 feet.
Netflix got real nervous, I know.
Oh, I
that.
bet they
They're on
did.
the other side of that bridge
Yeah.
over there.
Mhm.
At the same time, they had that strike right by Smith Peak,
Mhm.
and that was gonna burn into Portola. That
Right.
really had people jumping around. And this whole valley, you couldn't see anything, this valley's full of smoke. I remember driving out here and it's just, yeah. They had everybody in the world working on it, which is good. It's, any questions?
Did people really swim in the hot springs in the summer?
Well, they had a 6-inch pipe, there was up above, there's, I guess, a secondary pond up there.
Freshwater.
Yeah, freshwater, and they had it piped, and this White Sulphur Springs it didn't really even smell bad. Like you go to a sulfur bath, you know you're in it. But it would curl your hair. Everybody had an afro. It was, everybody had curly, you could tell where they'd been. But, it was, a 6-inch pipe coming into the pool. It went from 1 foot deep to like 12 or 14 feet deep at the other end. And had railing all the way around it, a handrail, which I always thought was dangerous. But, as a little kid, you just went along like that.
Yeah.
And it would run into the pool, and then it would run out at the deep end, and it would run over to this ditch, and then into that field across the way. And it was fine for, I don't know, 100 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know what changed. The seismic something that stopped the flow. Next door neighbor stopped the flow.
Luciano's.
Yeah.
Well, it still
punched
flows into that field over there because in the wintertime when the snow's on it,
These
we can see like a
steam,
yeah, it's like a little river of steam.
because it was year round. It was like 76 degrees all the time. It was amazing. And the weekends here it was always packed. But we would come out here Sunday and Monday when everybody was gone and rent the place for like $100.
It was Restaurant Monday.
Yeah, Restaurant
Everybody worked
Monday.
in the
Everybody
Mondays, yeah.
worked on everybody got off on Monday, and we'd come out here and people got married out here. We'd party out here, barbecue, a lot of barbecue out here. Yeah, this was a cool place. It was
It's always jumping.
yeah, and this is one of the historic routes from Truckee to Hobart Mills to Sierraville, maybe Satley.
20 miles.
Yeah, about every 20 miles here, Mohawk, although that isn't 20 miles. I don't know why. That was Mohawk was the stagecoach stop and Pony Express and all that. And then the 20 Mile House, but that was, God, what was his name? An old Burgermeister. He, his family his family, I can't remember his name. He was a historian for the Clampers too, which, Henry McGill. It was McGill's
Oh,
Ranch. And he was the only guy I know, he had a Rolls Royce Silver Cloud and a Bentley that he never drove. They were parked in the garage. His parents had probably bought them. His parents were, what's a polite term for smugglers? They were Dutch.
Importers.
Dutch importers, there you go. And his house was like a treasure trove. I remember going in there. This is way before it became the wedding venue it is now. Big brick building. And he had stuff, he had walls lined with Tang, Sun, Ming Dynasty china. Unbelievable. He had a side table like that one, signed by George Washington. He had letters from Lincoln. His parents had collected all this stuff. Grandparents, probably. Henry was old back in the day then. Looked like a heavy set, little goatee, would eat breakfast every day at the Gregel restaurant there. And he would, Virgie and him got along pretty well, but he was quite a dude, and he had stuff like when Coca-Cola came out with a real Tiffany lamp. They actually, it was one of those things, one of those collection things back in the 60s, like you could get, 500 packs of Marlboros, you could get, a Coke or something. But he had that over a hand-built pool table from the 1750s. And, a lot of, he had little treasure chests, little oak treasure chests full of Zuni and Mayan jewelry. He always wore a big squash blossom necklace when he was out and about. He was another piece of history here, a lot of history, and now it's an incredible wedding venue, I guess, down there now. You been there?
Not to a wedding event, but from what Sherry had said about one of her nieces being married there.
Yeah.
It's like, we're talking $30,000, $35,000
That's just
for
to
a
get
wedding.
in the front door.
Yeah.
You have to stay there,
Yeah.
eat there, the whole
And
thing.
clean up when you leave.
And clean up when you leave. Maybe he's getting sort of like that too, I guess.
Is it?
Chateau, the chalet.
The
chalet, yeah.
Chalet there. Which is, it's not a bad idea. This place, there, I've forgotten how many weddings I've been to here. You don't really need anything except a stage, maybe. This is
Well, we have a
the
stage.
best view. You see, advertise.
That's where we're going. That's where we're trying to go.
Yeah.
Tom, is there anybody around that can talk about Johnsville? We had a hike one time that Mr. Shaughnessy took us on this hike up Johnsville, and that was so interesting to see the foundations back in there.
Who? Maybe Tim Kurdusky. He was born here. Timmy, he's a docent up there
At the park.
At the park. I think who would remember. Most of those guys. Maybe trying to think. His son works for the Forest Service. He lives right next to the Iron Door up there.
Ernie?
Huh?
Was it Ernie?
Might be or
He went Forest Service.
no.
He wasn't
His
forced.
son no.
One house over.
His son lives in Plumas Pines. Married one of the
Fregolia.
Fregolia.
Yeah.
Don Senior might know, might remember. Who else would know? Murray maybe. Murray's. They have a lot of history here.
Foundations you saw in Johnsville? No, Jameson City.
I don't know. I think it was
I might
Johnsville.
just mention, I know Tim.
You know
up there at the
Kurdusky?
park.
Yeah.
I work with him as a docent.
Okay. Timmy's got a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, he pointed out like where the Chinese village was and who the different groups up there. They were
Yeah.
like little cities, and everybody had a bar and a brothel.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's, originally, back when gold was discovered in 1851, there was a town called Jameson City.
Right. Yeah.
And Jameson City was downstream from
It
Johnsville.
was below. Yeah.
And that was the original town, and for every miner, there was a saloon.
Oh yeah.
One of
There
those
was a-
very raucous and,
They said there was
a lot of people were fights all the time and,
Yeah.
and all that.
a lot of mud.
And, but then there was a Eureka Mill town, which was a town up around Eureka Lake.
Right.
And that town had about 200 to 300 people, post office, telegraph, everything.
There was
churches.
Not just the Plumas Eureka mine, but there was more than one Mammoth
and
mine
that
or
was-
something like that up there.
Yeah, but that particular thing, it ended up that, now there's, several trails that go up and around the old ruins.
Oh,
And
really?
all there is left now is just the rock foundations
Yeah.
of several of the homes.
Yeah.
And if you don't know where to look, you don't
Well,
see
you
them.
just walk right past them. 'Cause
Yeah.
back in those days, there was no trees up there.
Right,
It was all bald. The
It was
whole
all bald.
mountain was
Well,
bald.
they cleaned, you look at this valley around the turn of the last century, there's not a stick of wood around here, man. They just cleaned everything off for the mining, housing, mining, railroad, you name it. They cut everything out of here.
Yeah, it was just treeless.
Yeah,
And,
red fir was the big thing, built with red fir because it was the cleanest grain, hardest wood you could find up here at that time. That's why the Mohawk's Tavern, the old hotel's still standing. It's on rocks and stumps. It should have fallen down a long time ago, but it's the quality of the wood they used was pretty amazing, pretty significant. I don't think you can buy red fir anymore. But Johnsville.
Well, I just might mention also that with all the mining up there around Eureka Peak and, the Plymouth Eureka mine, and this whole area, Mohawk Valley, played a big role in supporting the mining.
Oh yeah.
From-
They flew logs down by Clio
Yeah.
down to the mill.
And this was an important
Eagle.
stagecoach stop,
Right.
back
Exactly.
when the miners were, because it allowed the families of miners to have a safe route up to the mining
Yeah,
area,
that's true.
and which they didn't have before.
They would put little donkey engine rails around here, any place thought there might be gold or timber or stuff. All around Cromberg, I went up with Larry Sternberg and those guys. There's a big Chinese village right before you get to the Mexican food restaurant there. But where the 20 Mile House is and down in that area, you can still see where they had foundations for where they would wash their clothes. The Chinese village would wash their clothes, and they would. The story goes they would take fines from the mines that they worked in and the roads they worked in, and pan gold down there, where they bring the fines back to their property there, because nobody bothered them down in that area, and that was pretty interesting because they built a lot of roads up here. That road that goes out of Johnsville that goes all the way to Nelson Creek and over to LaPorte. Every place that they had a creek or anything, you can see where they stacked the rocks. These rocks are still there after 150 years.
Any idea how much money, gold, they took out of this area?
I heard it was 100. This is when gold was like, I don't even know, it was $35 an ounce then. It was $180 million worth of gold came out of Eureka Peak.
It's on the state seal.
Yeah,
Eureka Peak.
yeah,
Eureka
it's
Peak,
yeah, it was unreal how much it was. And when my dad, early '60s, he got involved with the Fredericking family, who had not the 16-1 mine, the Ruby mine, which was down by Grass Valley. Very, very rich ore. Probably still could produce ore now. But they have property up behind Johnsville by the A Tree, and it's called the Sunnyside area, Sunnyside Mine. This is actually the western slope of the Sierras. And Earl Smith, who lived in Mohawk for a very short period of time, where the bar is now, that was just a cabin. Him and his brother Curly. He was Jill. They call it Jill poking. I don't know what that means. An old tractor, cable blade tractor. He was cutting a road in to Fredericing's property back in there, and he cuts this. The story goes, he cuts a stump out of the way, and there's a pocket of gold nuggets fall out of the hillside, and he gold drives people insane.
Still does?
Oh yeah, he and his brother, they took a little bit of it. I remember they were like little girls giggling over it, down in Mohawk, and they would touch it, put it away, touch it, put it away, and it's a sickness almost. And so my dad somehow got wangled into helping them with equipment, and built chalets back in there, and for years, probably for 5 or 6 years, they mined it up there. They built, it's the top of the Lavazola Creek flow, comes out of the hillside above it's sort of about halfway down the mountain there where the chalets are. Then it runs into Lavazola Creek. But they made a big pond, and they flumed it from a 14-inch, 12-inch, 10-inch on down. And if you do that with enough water, the water pressure by the time you get to about 1.5 inches is almost 200 pounds, 200 psi. You cut a tree in half with it. And they had this guy, an old miner from Johnsville, an old Swede Nelson. He was about 250 pounds, a big Swedish boy. They had this hose connected to about a 200-pound triangle, and all he would do was move it back and forth across the hillside. Tractor would cut a mound out of the hillside, and they'd just wash it, and it flumed into about maybe 200-foot sluice box, and they used indoor-outdoor carpet. They lined the whole thing with indoor-outdoor carpet and put little wooden bars all the way down it, and with enough water pressure, everything would flow over except the gold and the heavy minerals, and you'd see that come all in it down. And I remember my dad gave me a pan. He said, go play in that lower pond. They had a couple lower ponds, settling ponds, and you could dig the sand out and pan it, and you could see gold right there. But they weren't interested in that. That wasn't rich enough. They were only looking for the free placer. They call it placer gold because it wasn't combined with any other mineral. And that's part of that whole thing about the east-west strike slip zone. Everything's right up. The bedrock's up high, and then the heavy minerals are against the bedrock or in the bedrock if you're in quartz veins and that kind of stuff. And that's all I know.
Tom, what's the history of the Mohawk Tavern? You said it was the guys.
It was
Curly lived there.
Yeah, Curly and Earl, and they were. That's when they were first getting involved in that mine up there.
Yeah.
They looked like twins. They were heavy set. Smith, I don't know, English, Irish, whatever. I know he was a good bowler because he would take us bowling all the time. But round head, big body, big ears, and they didn't have. I'm feeling they were probably bad English or bad Irish because they both had some false teeth in their like 40s, and but they had a potbelly stove in there, and miners don't. There's not a lot of cleanliness around those guys. They had wives, they had family in Clio, but every once in a while they would clean up and go out and stuff. And then when they got involved in the mine, I don't know what happened to Curly. He disappeared. But Earl was around, always around, and Earl and Leah, his wife, they stayed up there. You think we get a lot of snow here? The western slope of the Sierras gets twice what we do, and they were at the mines probably between 7,000 to 8,000 feet in elevation out there, and they get 15 to 20 feet of snow. It's not unusual there, and they stayed out there one winter. And these chalets, you could probably put 2 chalets in this room. There was just a little A-frame, cook stove, and about everything else was where you could store canned goods. Canned goods, everything was canned because you once it started to snow, you were never going to go outside again. And they had a hatch in the roof, and the guy that would fly over to Weber Lake. They had a guy. There was a resort over there, and they would drop mail there, and the guy would continue to fly, and he would fly around and make his turn at Bucks and fly back, and then that's when he'd see Earl would open the latch on the top of the roof and wave to make sure they were still alive. They stayed there all winter, 20 feet of snow, and when they got done, she went to institution down in Chico. I remember that.
Yeah.
Because she kept saying he was trying to kill her with bags full of gold. And, why you would stay up there and isolate yourself? I mean, you're a prisoner to the weather and everything else. And nobody could get to you. If you had a problem, they'd find you in the spring. Yeah, it was insane.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember my dad telling me about that. I said, "Would you do that?" He goes, "No, I'd never do anything like that." It's beautiful there. It's where Rattlesnake Peak and Lavazola Creek, and that all runs down and becomes part of Empire Creek that runs into Downeyville, and becomes part of the Yuba River system down there. Real wild area, wild trout, wild people, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was a test of fortitude and stuff. I don't know why he thought somebody was going to try to rip them off up there. They'd hit a pretty good pocket of gold, and in the day, my dad was pretty loose about associations and who he dealt with and stuff. We got a tractor out of it, I guess, that had a chip out of the ring gear, because we had to to get it running. You had to park it on a hillside after the motor started to get it to engage in gear, because it wouldn't start on the level. It was something about it was just wrong. Anyway, it's a D6, a little hydraulic D6, but it was pretty raw out there. That the Four Hills mine is out in that area, and that was a big iron mine. And they even tried at one point. They tried to re-energize that mine. They were going to take it out. I don't know, how would they do that? Towards I-80. They were trying to get land grants for easement from that point, which is over by Spencer Lakes, all the way across to I-80, and they couldn't do it. Even though, I don't know what, there's still a lot of iron out there in the Four Hills mine, and I guess Smith he's crawled through that mine a couple times. Still got shafts, and you got to take rope and flashlight, but it's still open. And anyway, now that's all I got.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're giving you a little chronological history of the house and the property. And basically, it started in 1852 when Mr. Jameson, Gould, and Fred came out from the Allegheny Mountain area and so named this valley Mohawk Valley, because it reminded them of the Mohawk Valley back there in the Alleghenies. So they developed it at 400 acres at the time, and Mr. King built a little red shuttered hotel and served elegant meals, and had the dining room table for visitors between Truckee and Quincy with the stagecoach. This was a stagecoach here. So then in 1867, George McClear bought this from Mr. King, and he was from Pennsylvania, and he and his wife came over. He was a county supervisor. They didn't call him supervisors in those days, but it was what he was. From, let's see, 1878 to 1881. And he married a lady with a 5-year-old child. She was a widow. And they stayed here through all the snowfalls, and they had animals, and they grew produce, and they raised cattle, and they didn't have any fireplace. So everything was wood burning stoves here, which is kind of surprising to me, but maybe in the day, I don't know. Anyway, George died in 1890, And by the way, George McClear's picture is in the dining room. He was a large man. He was like 6 foot and 360 pounds, which is hard to believe him getting up those stairs. So George and his 4 children lived here with his wife, and that would be George Jr., Isabel called Belle, and Maud, and Edith. And the house was called the McClear House at the time. So he had these 4 children, and none of them had any heirs. No heirs were left. So the George Jr., the only boy, the only son, he married a lady from the red light district. And so the sisters didn't like her too much. But she not only was that, she actually burned down one of the buildings and was starting to burn another one when they got a hold of her. And after that, I don't know what happened to her. She wasn't around. Obviously, it had to be a divorce of some sort. So Belle herself became the real person who managed it. And the girls, the sisters, all 3 of them, were the ones that really worked the place. George Jr., who had the girlfriend or the wife, he was called the gentleman's rancher. He didn't do anything. So anyway, Belle fell ill, and her good friend Mava McAnich was her lady that owned Gold Resort at the time. And she said, please come over and help me. So Mava took care of her and George Jr. And there was a swimming pool. As I mentioned, it was built in 1928 and destroyed in 2017. But that pool replaced the small plunge bath that people knew before the pool was here. So people that came earlier in those years used to go in the plunge bath to refresh themselves and to use the mineral sulfur water, which everybody really thought was very healthy, and people came for that reason. So when, oh, by the way, in this living room, you'll look up there, there's a big divider up there. Well, this was 2 rooms at the original time. And that room was the ladies' parlor, and this room was the gentleman's parlor. Notice how much bigger the men's nothing. Anyway, so when Belle died in 1954,
doorknobs were down.
She left her ranch to Mava because of no kids. And Mava, as I said, owned the Gold Lake Lodge, and she was childless. So during her stay here, she ended up having no children. She left the ranch to her nephew, who we talked about earlier, Harry Mackenzie, and then he eventually died in an ultra-plane accident, sadly. So after that, the life came here with his widow and her kids, and they made it a bed and breakfast. And that apparently is very popular because as being a docent, I've met a lot of people who came here, and they miss the swimming pool. They love the memories they have here, and we're trying to bring all that back. Though we're not intending to ever make it a bed and breakfast. We just want it to be enjoyable by the community, to use it for events like this and any of your own parties and weddings eventually. So that's our aim, and to have a pool again. But anyhow, the ranch went up for sale in 2003. The Leah and Harry's, well, really it's Leah's children, Millers, that inherited it when Leah died. They didn't get along at all, and so eventually they sold it. And when I came along in the 20s, 2010 maybe, everything out here, well, when they sold it, it was 23. They had every piece of wonderful pieces from this house out on the lawn, and all of these people came and bought up everything. So fortunately, one of the ladies that lives here bought this Clio stove that's behind me. And that has a really interesting story, because it means that, that's why this is called Clio, because of that stove. The mail that they were getting was addressed to, at that time, WASH, W-A-S-H. Well, the mail went all over the place. You know, there's a lot of WASH, Washington, whatever. And so a couple of cronies are sitting around this very same pot-belly stove and said, we've got to change the name. And they said, well, what are we going to name it? And somebody looked and went, well, what's wrong with Clio? So that's the story of how this came in.
Where does Clio come from? What's the origin of the term? Why is Clio on that
Well,
stove?
it's made in St. Louis, the stove is. But the name Clio comes from, you know.
One of the 9 muses of Greek mythology. You've heard of the other ones. Terpsichore, that's dance.
Effeminate.
Calliope is music. And Clio is history.
Yeah.
So 100 years ago,
Actually, no.
people were into Greek mythology a lot more than recently. So it's completely reasonable that they picked Clio, the muse of history, to put on their stove.
Neat. Yeah. And at one time, the story goes,
Euterpe is another muse.
Clio itself, this little town once had 13 saloons, I'm told. Couldn't find one now. So there'll be a history there.
10,000 people lived in Clio.
Well, there was a lot of, I don't know the number, but I will say that there were miners up here,
Yeah.
and they're women. So,
And there were.
And they're
Well, they ran logs down
yeah,
the Feather River, down to the mill.
yeah.
I guess you could run them all the way down the slope, really.
And
The
there's a
water-
real big mill there.
Oh, a huge mill. And
Yeah.
then Mount Tamba was a big mining, or big timber concern, because you could, above Mount Tamba, which is defunct now, but
Right,
there was, like they have in Grayville, those big concrete blocks that went all the way to the top of the mountain there, and they had an 8-foot V flume. They diverted a creek into the flume, and they would shoot logs all the way down to the Feather River, and then take them down to Sloat, because
Wow.
Sloat was a big mill.
and there were a lot of people in Portola, and I mean, it was a booming area at one time, and now
Can't
it's
buy a liquor
pretty
license.
much a resort tourist
On the
attraction.
old population.
But there were, they had
Portola had
the
29
business
bars.
and the people here, and that's why those little red
It's
houses
just,
are out
every
there.
place.
They were company people that lived in there, and now they're turned into shops. So, but anyway, to 2003, the ranch went up for sale because the brother and sister didn't like each other. And
That's right.
so the antiques and the memorabilia were out and sold to Stephen Lusto of Scotts Valley. He began dismantling the place. He took down the 3 houses, they had a boarding house, a meat house, I think it's an ice house. Took them all down, and people began to notice that it was not right for a historic designation. So they began a campaign to save the ranch. And that's how the Mohawk Valley Stewardship Council started. And that's all of the people that want to be in it. And they volunteer. Everything here is done by donations and volunteer work. So we really made a lot of difference here. This house was empty, and we have been given by donation every little piece of furniture in this place from different people. For instance, the sofa that you're sitting on, that is from the late 1800s. This one and the orange one back there. And we were just, people heard about us and called and said, would you take this? And we said, but we were happy. It all turned out really well. So everything here is very unique. We try to keep the theme of the time between the 1850s and then early 1900s. So even the books back there are really old and very fun to have a chance to look at it. We've replaced the drapes, thank God. They were very old and dusty, kind of like Carol Burnett.
What about all the wallpaper?
Wallpaper, there, I'm told at least 6 density of wallpaper on over and over. And during the different times of the ownership, like Belle and then Mava and then Leah, they have worked on it. And the house has different configurations. It's not quite the way it used to be. But so now the 10 bedrooms, which were then, are now 5. And but remember, the people were small, and they had no closets in those rooms. So they were able to, have more than one person staying in each room. So that became 5, became 10 as it went on. So basically, we want everybody who's here, wants to volunteer, please see me. We love it. We don't work you too hard. We have usually a Summerfest event the last Sunday in June, ever since 2010, and it's really fun. And music and food and drinks. However, we're in the midst of working on a construction out there for an ADA pathway to the stage, which is beautiful. And so we probably won't be doing that this year, but we'll be doing something in the fall once it's done. So, anybody have any questions?
Hey Judy, isn't there a Clio stove in the Clio Inn?
Yes, and it's a Clio stove, but it's not the Clio.
I thought you might have grabbed it from over
We
there.
switched, no.
They have this,
This
So
is,
they
have
made
that
more than
one.
one, huh?
and
A whole series, right?
I do have to
It's a
say that
manufacturer in St. Louis that makes Clio stoves.
Yeah, I mean,
So
Yeah.
one
this
of the
is
odds
the
is
brand
we've got out
here.
to here, you know?
There's one in the schoolhouse, or no, not the schoolhouse, the old hotel in Goodyear's Bar as well.
yeah.
And it's, the one in Clio, the store was probably that tall, with the little thing on top of it. You can take a big piece of wood. His Seta had it going all the time in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Oh, she got this one.
He was they were half the town
What
population.
is that little thing on top of it? Is it a cinema
I think you
bar?
can put water in there.
Old Larry used to run the store.
Oh, to kind of keep it humid?
Yeah, you can
Probably.
put,
It's a
there's
good
a water
idea.
tray that fits in here, I think, and you can probably put low water.
It's no longer working. It's no,
Why not?
Larry the
it's,
butcher.
you look over here, there's a big
Oh, Larry
crack.
Sanderson?
Oh,
But, it's one of those things, if we had enough time and money, we'd make everything the same.
All you need is some
I work
nylon.
hard to keep it,
Iron rod.
history though, historic, and, that's great.
What's that?
When did,
All of these stories are on the website, by the way.
Oh, that's
www.whitesulphurspringsranch.com.
right,
it's already hard to keep track of it all, but
it is.
the Mackenzie man who, he crashed his airplane,
Yes.
is that right? With the guy from La Paloma?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
What year approximately was that?
That had to be in the early 1900s. Mackenzie, Harry died in 1983.
Harry McKin,
Harry did, yeah.
Yeah.
Harry
So
McKenzie.
his accident was right then.
That's when the plane
Mhm.
Never heard of that.
1983.
Right.
Wow.
And then that's when his wife Leah, and she had been married before, so she had her 2 kids. And that's when they decided to make it a bed and breakfast.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it would, people tell me they were here, some people being a docent are telling me stories about ghosts. They said, oh, I can feel it. I said, well, I've been here for a long time. I'm here alone a lot of times, and I've never had any experience. But, everybody believes what they want.
But we think the house is happy.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Feel
true.
the house
That was
happy.
the lady said to me, oh, the ghosts don't bother you because they know you're taking care of it.
I think so.
There you go.
I believe that.
And that's okay with me. Yes.
Oh,
When I was a kid, my parents told me that at one point Bing Crosby almost bought this.
You know, I have heard that too. In fact, it's not probably untrue. There were a lot of Hollywood celebrities that I've been told but not verified that came here, stayed here, or wanted to be here. So I don't bring it up because I don't have any facts, but I believe
Well,
it.
my parents said it.
No,
They said so.
Harry
I
Mason.
have heard that.
Who's
No,
Harry
I have
Mason?
heard that.
What did
Raymond
Burr?
Raymond Burr. He had a place up here. Harry Mason had a place up here. Out in the Sierra Valley, and then, who's the guy who's talking about down in Greenhorn?
Cary Grant.
Cary Grant. He was here as they were building Greenhorn Guest Ranch
Oh, yeah.
to what it is now. And he was in his 80s. And when my wife was working at Mount Tomlin, she said he didn't look like Cary Grant, but when he talked, you could tell. Cute.
Ms. Judy
I
Q.
certainly know that. She could have loved to have met him. Well, we came up 25 years ago, and just when the Stewardship Council started, and somebody like me came over and said, "Would you make an hors d'oeuvre for the Summerfest?" I said yes, and that's it. 25 years later.
And the rest is history.
So anyway, please help us, join us as a volunteer. Please call me. My card's out there, and Jan is also part of it. And we can give you a tour on your own or with your family, and we'd be happy to do so. And we'd always love volunteers and donations. So thank you.
Thank you.
And then, folks, that's about it for the planned content this evening. Thank you guys for joining us, and thank you for just sharing some stories with us and just helping further the conversation. I mean, I think part of the fun in doing this is finding places, finding stories, and then learning I don't know the half of it. And you know, it's the conversations we have, the questions that get asked. Those are the real memories that stick. Jan, do you want to say anything before we wrap up?
I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. It's just been a pleasure. And I really didn't know what to expect tonight. I didn't know the attendance numbers. I couldn't get anything off of the Eventbrite. I mean, it was just like, so 3 o'clock I was here and put a desperate thing out on Facebook saying, tickets available at the door, you know, and the same poster and everything. So thank you for coming, thanks for paying attention, and thanks for keeping this history going. It's really important to this valley. Thank you all. And thanks, Jason, for accepting us as a venue for your program.